Namine. Namaste Saraswave Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshitarine. Jai Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for joining today's session. So we have been discussing from this Bhaktiyaloka by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and in that we have been discussing about the fourth obstacle to devotional service, which is Niyamagraha. Athara Prayasascha Prajalpo Niyamagraha. So we saw that Niyamagraha has two meanings: Niyama Agraha and Niyama Agraha. So Niyama Agraha means too much eager to accept the rules without accepting the essence of that particular principle, essential essence of that particular rule. That is Niyama Agraha. Niyama Agraha means not accepting the rules, thinking that one is prematurely, more elevated, and then giving up the rules like that. So these are the two types of Niyamagraha. One is to be attached to the lower rules, which was supposed to give up as and when one progresses. And another is to prematurely give up the rules for which one is actually qualified for and accept higher rules. So both are actually problems. Both are actually Niyamagraha. So last week we discussed the section we discussed. I will do a brief recap of that summary because Radha Pramod Prabhu is traveling. He will not be able to speak. So I will do the summary. So last week we saw that a person becomes qualified for Karmanda or Sakama Karma Yoga. We saw qualification for Adhikar, for Karma Adhikar. What is the Adhikar for Karma, Jnana Yoga, etc. So when does a person become qualified for Karma Kanda or Sakama Karma Yoga? When he gives up illicit material activities and accepts sanctioned sense gratification according to the scriptures, then he becomes qualified for Sakama Karma Yoga. So Shastras describe in this verse, Tavat Karmani Kurvita na Nirvidyeta Yavata Matkata Shravanadava Shda Yavanna Jayate. So in that particulars, it is mentioned a Karmadhikari should continue to follow Varnashram Dharma as long as, you cannot say Karmadhikari, a person should follow Varnashram Dharma as long as he does not develop detached from this material world. So when one practices Nishkama Karma Yoga, then gradually the heart becomes purified. And when the heart becomes purified, one develops complete detachment from this material world. So that person is qualified for Jnana Yoga. So then he can give up Varnashram duties. Or Mat Kata Shravanadava Shraddha. If he develops faith in the process of Bhakti, then he can give up Varnashram. But if he has neither developed detachment from this material world, nor developed faith in the path of Bhakti, then such a person should continue to perform his Varnashram duties. So a Jnana Yogi should continue practicing the path of Jnana till he gets faith in the path of Bhakti. Because there is only one path higher than Jnana, which is Bhakti. So then in this context we saw, why should a Bhakti Yogi continue? Should a Bhakti Yogi continue to perform Varnashram duties? We saw what is the purpose of Varnashram duties. So the Shastras say the purpose of Varnashram duties is to purify the heart. So if a devotee, has a devotee attained a pure heart, a sadhaka? No. So should he perform varnashram duties as described in the Dharmashastras? No, not necessary. Then the question is, then how will his heart get purified? What about the path of bhakti? Isn't the path of bhakti capable of purifying the heart? So, so therefore, bhakti in itself is capable of purifying the heart. So a devotee need not practice varnashram dharma, even though some activities which may be seen as varnashram dharma, if they are favorable for bhakti, then as secondary limb of bhakti, that person can follow that. So when a devotee performs an activity which looks like the varnashrama, but with the mood that, oh, this is anukul for my bhakti, therefore I will practice, then that activity is considered to be a limb of bhakti and it is not considered to be a limb of varnama. So this we saw. Okay. So then the problem with niyamagraha is, if even after attaining faith in bhakti, if one stubbornly does not give up the rules of karma or jnana, then he is committing niyamagraha. Because after becoming qualified for bhakti, then one should give up, one should accept the limbs of devotional service and one should give up the limbs of karma and jnana. So, and what is the qualification for bhakti? Faith. Shraddha is the only qualification for bhakti. Okay. And then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, the temple of Krishna Prem is situated on the peak of Goloka Vrindavan. You see, this is Madhurya Bhakti, which is Bhakti in Goloka Vrindavan, and the peak is Prema, and below that is Aishwarya Bhakti, that is Bhakti seen in Vaikunta, and below that is Jnana Yoga, through which you can attain till Brahma Jyoti, and below that is Karma Kanda or Sakama Karma Yoga, through which you can attain the 14 planetary systems. Right? So, so like that. So, which means each of these have their own rules and regulations. So one should perform those rules and regulations and not be stubbornly attached to the lower rules and not impudently skip the lower rule and follow the and follow the higher rules. Both are wrong. Okay. So then we are, is a devotee avidhi gochara. Avidhi gochara means one who is not expected to follow the rules. Is a devotee expected to follow the rules or not? So the answer is yes and no. Yes, he is beyond the rules and regulations of varnashrama and dharmastras. A devotee is not expected to follow the varnashram rules as described in the dharmastras. But he is not above the rules of Bhakti Shastras. So one has to accept the Dharma and the Shastras should be according to one's adhikar. If one is qualified for karma, then his Dharma is Varnashrama and the Shastras are Dharma Shastras. If one is qualified for Bhakti, his Dharma is Bhakti and the Shastras are Bhakti Shastras. So a devotee is Avidhi Gochara if you take Vidhi to mean Dharma Shastra Vidhi. He is beyond Dharma Shastra Vidhi, but he is not beyond Bhakti Shastra Vidhi. Like that. And we have to see even within Bhakti, there are stages. Adav Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya Ata Anartha Nivritti Syat Tato Nishta Ruchis Tata Saktis Tato Bhava Stata Prema Abhyudanjati. So therefore, there are rules for those within, there are rules for within Anartha Nivritti. Then the rules when one reaches Nishta, there are rules when one reaches Ruchi, there are rules when one reaches Asakti. When one moves from Anartha Nivritti to Nishta to Ruchi to Asakti to Bhava to Prema, one should give up the rules of the previous stage and accept the rules of the newer stage. And there are, rules slightly differ, even though Navada Bhakti all has to practice, but then there is emphasis, little more emphasis, little emphasis, little less emphasis, at various stages, one should be careful and accordingly practice. Okay. So after crossing these 4 stages, one then attains Bhava Bhakti. So one must follow the rules according to the stage that the person is in. For example, even hearing and studying of Shastra should be according to one's adhikar. Even though everything is Bhakti Shastra, but the esoteric pastimes of Krishna with the gopis in Vrindavan cannot be led by one who is still struggling with Anartha Nivritti. Right? In Anartha, for example, one in Anartha Nivritti stage is not allowed to focus so much on hearing and studying the pastimes of Krishna with the gopis. And with respect to deity worship, if you see, in the initial stages, one should serve deities of Radha and Krishna in the mode of Lakshmi Narayan. But in the and following clearly the rules of Archana Vidhi. Okay. Pancharatri ke Archana Vidhi, one should very strictly follow in the early stages of deity worship, and one should work them in the mode of Lakshmi Narayan. But when one progresses more and more to the stage of Raganuga, then that Archanatmika Bhakti becomes Smaranatmika Bhakti, and the mode of service from the mode of Lakshmi Narayan becomes Radha and Krishna. Okay. So, and whatever may be strict niyamas or rules at the stage of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti may not be that strict rules Raganuga Bhakti. Right? So, like that, even within the stage of Bhakti, one should understand where one is and accordingly understand the rules and regulations of that particular stage and follow those rules only. Right? So, this we saw. Therefore, even within the stages of devotional service, we must be careful of what rules to follow according to our stage. As one leaves behind one level and progresses to the next, he should honor the rules of the latter and leave aside those of the former. So this we already saw, right? Otherwise, one will be guilty of niyamagraha and one will be very weak in reaching the next level. Okay. If one has developed faith in Bhakti, one should follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti and not just be stubbornly attached to the rules of the lower rules of Varnashrama and other such things. Okay. So, but the parent rule amongst all the rules is Smartavya Saradam Vishnor Vismartavyona Jatuchit. Sarve Vidhi Nishedhyasya Reteyo Reva Kinkara. All the other rules are subservient to this parent rule of always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. So, therefore, in any the simple principle we can understand. Am I practicing a rule which is according to my level within the realm of Bhakti? So we have to ask this question. Be able to remember Krishna in a favorable way. Whether that particular aspect or limb of devotional service is aiding our remembrance of Krishna or hindering that remembrance of Krishna. This we have to see. For example, we saw this example of Vikriditam Rajavadu Biridam Cha Vishnur Shraddhanvito Nushnuni, that verse which comes, which says that by reading the pastimes of Krishna with the gopis, lust is gone from the heart. But we have to see whether by reading such intimate pastimes, if our lust is increasing or decreasing. If it is increasing, then we should give it up. If it is decreasing, then we are qualified for it, right? So then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that the rules mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas are for householders and it's not for renunciates. Because renunciates are governed by taste and not by rules, they naturally follow those rules which are favorable to their devotional service. Because renunciates are renounced because they have developed that sense of detachment due to their higher taste in Bhakti. Because taste is governing their practice of Bhakti, they are not governed by rules. So, therefore, they naturally follow those rules. They are not governed by rules. So the first symptom of one who has attained Shraddha is surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. And that surrender is of two types. One for the soldiers and the other for the renunciates. So he says that by the practice of bhakti and the rules mentioned for householders, the householders advance and they also qualify themselves for Raganuga Bhakti or attain the level of Ruchi through Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So by following the rules of Vaidhi Sadhana, a householder or sadhaka can gradually reach the stage of Nishta, Ruchi, and at that stage of Ruchi, they are no longer controlled by rules. They are governed by taste, and if they have developed those tastes, and such people are not dependent on the rules, but they do follow the rules automatically because um, you know they don't have taste for material things, they have taste for the proper spiritual activities only, so it inspires them. So this is where we ended our discussion about Niyamagraha last time. So before we continue our discussion for today, um, if there are any quick discussion points, comments based on what we have discussed till now, I will pause for a few seconds to see if there are any quick questions, comments, then we can take. Okay, just hold on. Let me, yeah. Yes, Sachi Puran Prabhu.
Prabhu Dandat, please accept my
Dandat Prabhu. Dandat Prabhu.
apology. Prabhu, the
So,
point I was mentioning that many times this Shastras like Chaitanya Charitamrita, we consider is a PhD study and we keep it in a cupboard only. So till the time
mhm,
we depart from this world, it remain in the cupboard. We don't touch as it is a PhD study. So
mhm,
what is the guideline? At least Srila Prabhupada books like Chaitanya Charitamrita in a glimpse format or in a maybe under the instruction of some devotees, they can
mhm.
study now because otherwise there is
Yes,
no chance that.
no, definitely. Chaitanya Charitamrita we can study, especially Prabhupada has written such elaborate commentaries, so which will always keep us very much on track. So Prabhupada, even though Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is lot of rasa involved there, there is uh, there is not much of Madhurya rasa which is explicitly mentioned. Chaitanya is definitely studied, and especially with Prabhupada's purports, he gives the essential siddhanta behind the whole thing. So it keeps us very much on track. So definitely Chaitanya Charitamrita we can study, no problem with that.
Yeah, yeah. My point is that many people say it is PhD study, and our devotees are very sincerely following that PhD, the statement of making it as a PhD. So
Of
they keep
course,
it in the cupboard only.
no. PhD in the sense Prabhupada said, study it after you study Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. So
Mm.
at least study Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and then study Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Mm. No,
So.
I was mentioning, Prabhuji, the point is the most practical application that by one example Mahaprabhu is giving. So
Mhm,
at the glimpse, as a glimpse of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes,
mhm,
sometimes that should be given to Gaudiya Vaishnava at least. Like Prabhupada has left Srimad Bhagavatam's translation and then he started translating Chaitanya Charitamrita and completed it.
mhm,
So as a Gaudiya Vaishnavas, if we don't know the Mahaprabhu's Leela or any detail about what Prabhupada has written, then by the time they will study Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, I don't know whether there is a time remain for even understanding Chaitanya Charitamrita. So as a glimpse
No,
of Gaudiya
here,
Vaishnava Siddhant,
yeah, here the um, he says, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur says, you have to first study Chaitanya Charitamrita and you have to understand Bhagavatam through Chaitanya Charitamrita.
yeah,
So through the eyes of Chaitanya Charitamrita. But of course, Prabhupada did say first Bhagavad Gita, then Bhagavatam, then Chaitanya Charitamrita. And
mm,
interestingly, if you see in the beginning of in the introduction to his first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, uh, Prabhupada describes the life and precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. His whole Chaitanya Leela in brief he mentions in the beginning of Bhagavatam only. So Chaitanya Leela is
yeah,
there. Thus, he was the perfect
yeah,
preacher of Bhagavatam. So yeah. So while studying Bhagavatam, we can study Chaitanya Charitamrita also, especially with Srila Prabhupada's purport. That is definitely recommended.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Mother Gail.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Yes,
Hare
on
Krishna.
this same point, I've heard, and you're actually supporting my point by mentioning the fact that the CC synopsis is there in the beginning of Bhagavatam. What I've heard is that it's even advisable to read CC first because it gives a person an illustration of what the Bhagavatam is talking about. You know, it gives a person like a concrete example of what is written.
Yeah, you can. But lot of what the expressions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially in the Antyalila, it is very difficult to understand also actually. Yeah, in one sense, yes. That's why Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati did say that you have to, in fact, he went to the extent of telling you have to read, I don't exactly remember, something like 10 times you have to study Chaitanya Charitamrita before you study Bhagavatam, something like that. So that you understand Bhagavatam through the eyes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings.
Who was that Acharya you said?
Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
Yeah, and as you said, you know, the CC is in the introduction itself of Bhagavatam.
And another thing, Chaitanya Charitamrita especially, because Chaitanya Charitamrita is not just a biography. Chaitanya Charitamrita has all the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, which is essentially based on Srimad Bhagavatam. So therefore, yes, I don't see any reason why one should not read Chaitanya Charitamrita early, because Chaitanya Charitamrita is not just a plain biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It has complete Siddhanta in it. Yeah. And in fact, there is a historical significance to this all, that Chaitanya early works early biographical works of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like Chaitanya Bhagavat, were all purely biographical works. It had no Siddhanta in it actually. So over a period of time, and they were all written in Bengali, and all the philosophical works which were subsequently written by the Goswamis were all in Sanskrit language. So the Bengalis, in one sense, had access only to the pure biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in their language, which did not explain the Siddhanta behind the emotions that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited. So, therefore, you needed, and over a period of time, they became sort of not so disinclined to philosophy only, because there were philosophical works in Bengali. All the works in Bengali were only biographical works. So they were interested only in biography. So when Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was assigned this task, he had the double responsibility of not just presenting another biographical work, but along with that, very properly embed the philosophical teachings also. And Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami had the access to the philosophical works, Sanskrit philosophical works written by the Goswamis, and he knew the language, Sanskrit language, and he knew Bengali also. That was an advantage. So he understood the philosophy perfectly through the mouths of Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and then compiled the biography in which he very perfectly embedded the theology also. of or the philosophy of Chaitanya Vaishnavism, and then gave it to the Bengali speaking uh, devotees. So for the this was, you can say, this was certainly not the first um, biographical work in Bengali, but this was certainly the first, you can say, serious philosophical work in Bengali in the framework of a biography. So that way, this is not purely biography. This has the complete teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. Yeah, he quotes extensively from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami um, in his Chaitanya Charitamrita. Is that okay, Mataji?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Arpita Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances.
Please accept.
Prabhuji, one doubt I had, I was not able to understand one thing, that previously when we were talking about the application of the principles, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talked about Grihastha and Grihatyagi, householders and renunciates. Then we were saying that householders are sadhakas, married or unmarried, they are sadhakas, and grihatyagis, renunciates, we said, those who leave the house out of natural detachment, which is at the stage of bhava, like that.
Generally,
But
yeah.
but here, is it that the renunciates also refer to those who are eligible to take renunciation, and that's why even those who have got taste means, or greed, greed, those who have got means those who have qualified themselves for Raganuga Bhakti, and those who have attained the stage of Ruchi, are they also eligible to take renunciation, Prabhuji? Raganuga Bhakti devotees and Ruchi stage devotees?
It seems to just that way, maybe, because there is not much, in one sense,
Hmm.
gap between Ruchi and Bhava, because post Anartha Nivritti, the
Ruchi,
progress
Asakti
quite
Bhava.
fast. Yeah.
Hmm.
So not in terms of number of stages, but in terms of time it takes um, to reach the stage of Bhava from Ruchi.
Hmm.
Anartha Nivritti is very protracted, very long. But
Hmm.
in terms of Ruchi, especially if you have developed the greed, uh, definitely this seems to suggest that that might be a reasonable good qualification to
Hmm.
accept the renounced order.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
So it's like above nishtha. If people really want to accept renounce order, they can accept. Right,
Above,
Prabhuji?
yeah,
Nishtha,
above
above nishtha.
Ruchi, above Nishta,
R-
people have definitely shown symptoms of greed. Then one can with proper guidance accept the renounced order.
Prabhuji, for Raganuga devotees, now attaining Ruchi through Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is different. And now Raganuga devotees, for them even one instruction is also there, that they reside in Vraja. So they can, some reside mentally in Vraja and some can reside physically also. So Raganuga devotees means attaining that greed qualifies them for renunciation.
Yeah,
Renunciation,
yeah,
right?
they don't
So
have to physically stay in Vraja.
yeah, but
Um,
they are qualified. They might not renounce, but they are qualified, right,
yeah,
Prabhuji?
yeah.
Raganuga Bhakti devotees, they are qualified. They
Yes,
have got that qualification, but okay, but they might not renounce externally, internal,
correct.
like that. And for Ruchi also like that, because Prabhuji here, when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is telling that the surrender is of two types, for the householders and for the renunciates, then he is telling that both of them become unalloyed surrender souls while advancing on the path of sadhana. So
Yeah.
then I was thinking that renunciates are already unalloyed. Then he is telling
See,
maybe they are attaining higher stages of prema and all, like that. He's mentioning that.
there is a historical significance to this, because by
Hmm.
the time Bhaktivinoda Thakur was writing this, there were
Hmm.
many who had accepted the renounced order without qualification.
Oh,
So
okay.
now what do you do? So you have to essentially
Hmm.
give instructions to them. You can't say give up bhakti, get married, come back again, and then start the whole thing. So because
Hmm.
Gaudiya Vaishnavism was rudderless, it was like directionless for a significantly long time till
Hmm.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur started setting it right. So
Hmm.
at least those renunciants, those who had no qualification but accepted the renounced order, but now willing to hear from Srila Bhaktivinoda
Hmm.
Thakur, he has to give
Hmm.
them instructions from where they are, right? So,
Hmm.
so therefore,
Okay.
from that historical perspective, also we could see, why are you giving rules for renunciants? Aren't renunciants governed by ruchi? So,
Hmm.
or taste? Yes, but this is the ideal state when renunciation is accepted according to qualification. What about those people who have accepted renunciation without qualification? So eventually you cannot reject them because they were misguided. So therefore rules are mentioned for them. But ideally, for them there are no rules.
Hmm. Okay, Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, we discussed this Madhurya Bhakti, the peak is Prema.
Mhm.
So, Madhurya Bhakti, peak is
Madhurya
Prema
does
means,
not, Madhurya Bhakti means not Madhurya Rasa. Uh,
okay.
Madhurya
Yes,
Bhakti
Prabhuji,
means,
that I
yeah,
understood. Madhurya Bhakti means Bhakti in Goloka, any of the five rasas
sweetness.
it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, correct.
Hmm. So, but Prabhuji, so everyone in Goloka has Prema, na? So,
Yes,
Madhurya Bhakti and Prema, is there any difference? No difference, na?
no
Same,
different,
na?
no different. Yeah, same.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Right. Okay, so, okay, there is something in the chat box also. Okay, okay, I will first take questions, verbal questions, and then in the chat box, I'll take. Okay, Mother Gail.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. I'm sorry. Just now we made a distinction between Bhakti Rasa and Bhakti, Madhurya Bhakti and Madhurya Rasa.
Yeah.
So we are on the path now. Anyway, can you just quickly make that distinction for me, please?
If I say Aishwarya and Madhurya, then I am talking about the mood of sweetness and tolerance. So that mood of sweetness is also called as Madhurya. But that mood sweetness, Madhurya can have 5 rasas, one of which is also called as Madhurya, conjugal. So the word Madhurya can indicate sweetness, which can have 5 flavors. And the word Madhurya can also indicate conjugal affection, which is one of those 5 flavors also. Does it make sense, Mataji?
Um,
Okay, I
okay,
will explain. Let me
Aishwarya. Okay, I'm sorry.
let me write it down. It may become a little bit more clear. So that's, oh, just hold on. Okay. There is bhakti can be performed in 2 modes. Aishwarya or awe and reverence, and Madhurya, sweet
Mhm.
intimacy. Okay. So
Yes.
now within this Aishwarya mode, there can be Shanta, neutral, Dasya, servitude, Vatsalya, parental. Then there is Sakya, friendship, and then there is Madhurya, which is conjugal. Okay. And similarly, within this sweet, intimate mood also, there can be these 5 rasas. So the point is, Shanta Dasya Sakya Vatsalya and Madhurya. So, so the word Madhurya has two meanings. One is generic sweetness, that which indicates sweet intimacy, and Madhurya also more specifically means conjugal relationship. So that's the distinction that is made here. Is that relevant, Mataji?
Let me see. Okay, in the Aishwarya refers to more when Krishna is in the role of like king, right?
Yeah, Vaikunta in last Lord Narayana.
And Madhurya Bhakti is Goloka,
Yeah,
Vrindavan.
Goloka. Yeah.
So, okay, so Madhurya Bhakti can include all of the five, but then
Rasas.
there's Madhurya Rasa. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Okay, there are some questions in the chat box now. I will take. Okay. If bhakti is the cause of bhakti, then why even to engage in varnashrama? Well, yeah, we don't really have to strictly follow the rules of varnashrama according to dharmashas, but we can perform some of the activities which may seem like varnashrama, but if we do it because it is favorable for bhakti, then they also fall within bhakti only. Right, like that. Next question. Srila Prabhupada accepted devotees to fully engage in his preaching mission, I guess. Full-time brahmachari, irrespective of their standards. Even in between, they fell down in some cases. He made them as personal servants. How to understand this? Oh, when we are talking about renounced order, we are talking about, in one sense, like the kind of brahmacharis. We are talking about, in the traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava system, there were Babajis, Babaji initiate. They were actually called the initiates. The whole brahmacharya, sannyas, these ashramas were actually introduced in Gaudiya Vaishnava practice by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So before Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, there were only two ashrams, Grihastha and Grihatyagi, where Grihastha would include everyone, whether one is married or unmarried. But if Grihastha would mean actually sadhaka, and Grihatyagi would mean siddha, perfected. So, but because there was lot of inappropriate, unqualified people up to the path of renunciation, so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur said that he further divided this into 4 stages. He introduced that which sounded like the traditional varnashram, grihastha, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas, like that. And he put, Babaji as beyond even that, like that. Anyway, I think that's clear. So Krishna Prabhu asks, is there Vaikuntha, Madhurya Rasa in Vaikuntha? Yeah, Mother Lakshmi has Madhurya Rasa in Vaikuntha. Okay. Are there quick other discussion points before we move ahead? Okay. If there is none, then we will continue our discussion. Okay. Krishna Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Prabhu, in Vaikuntha, when you say Madhurya Rasa, that I was referring to between Jivas and the Lord. In the case of Lakshmi, it is the concert of the Lord. No, that's a different thing. I'm talking about the Nityas.
Whether Jivas, yeah, generally not. Dasya, Shanta are more prominent. Yeah, generally not.
But in the Golok Vrindavan, even the the Jiva Tattva, even they can have experience Madhurya Rasa.
Yeah.
So that's a distinction to be noted, that in Vaikuntha, Jivas can't aspire for Madhurya Rasa.
They don't want to also. They don't want to also.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in other words, it is absent in Vaikuntha Loka.
For the others. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay. So now there is one more question. Mahipal Reddy Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Dandat.
Prabhu, how to understand, in one of the lectures, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj mentions that considering all the Lakshmis in the Vaikuntha, their prema is not even equal to the prema of one gopi in Goloka. So does it mean it refers to the Radharani or even any Jiva also in Golaka who is in Madhurya Rasa?
I would guess definitely in that context to it, in terms of the mood of worship, definitely all the other Lakshmis put together for Krishna in Vrindavan, he would rather have that one Jiva in the form of a gopi more than those limited Lakshmis of Vaikuntha. But this cannot be said of Lord Narayana. Lord Narayana would prefer that one Lakshmi only. So it depends on from whose perspective. From the perspective of Krishna in Vrindavan, he would definitely prefer that one gopi. She has that mood which perfectly suits his mood in Vrindavan.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
Okay. I think we should move ahead now. Any further questions we will take little later. Okay. So we did this about this verse. Jnananishto virakto va madbhakto va napekshakah salingan ashramam stekva chare vidigochara. A learned transcendentalist dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and thus detached from external objects. Jnananishta virakto va madbhakto va, or my devotee who is anapekshakah, who is detached even from the desire liberation. Sa lingan ashramam stekva, both neglect those duties based on external rituals or paraphernalia, which is varnashram duties. Avidigocharaha, thus their conduct is beyond the range of rules and regulations. In this context only we discuss, does it mean that the devotees are beyond all rules? No, they are beyond the rules of dharma shastras, but they are not beyond the rules of bhakti shastras. Similarly, the Jnana yogis are beyond the rules of dharma shastras, but they are not beyond the rules of bhakti shastras. Jnana shastras. So, and further he quotes another verse: Ekantitam gatanantu Shri Krishna charanabjayoho bhaktihi swatah pravarteta vignaihi kim vratadibihi. He says, Ekantitam gatanam tu. When one becomes a pure devotee of the Lord, Shri Krishna charanabjayoho bhakti, then devotion to the lotus of Krishna, swatah pravarteta, is spontaneously established in his heart. Kim vratadibihi. What is the need to observe rituals? Tad vignaihi, that simply obstruct one's devotional service. Then that devotional service becomes jnana karmadi avrita. Okay, jnana and karma, we have to understand very clearly. The paths of jnana and karma can never support bhakti. They can only obstruct bhakti. Bhakti is best practiced without the obstruction of jnana and karma, or yoga for that matter. So bhakti does not need the support of jnana and karma. Jnana and karma can never support bhakti. They can only obstruct bhakti. You have to understand that. So if you have developed faith in the practice of pure devotional service, then we should not contaminate it with the practices of jnana and karma. That is why Srila Rupa Goswami says, Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam. Like that. Okay. Further, another verse is here by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to make this point. Na mayi ekanta bhaktanam gunadoshod gunaha sunam samachittanam buddhehe paramupeyusham. So he says, material piety and sin which arise from the good and evil of the world cannot exist with my unalloyed devotees. So my unalloyed devotees, which means unalloyed devotees on the platform of practice, which is sadhakas, and unalloyed devotees on the platform of perfection, which is siddhas, the perfected devotee, both of them. So unalloyed means their practice of sadhana is not covered by jnana, karma, yoga, etc. That is the meaning of unalloyed. So, na mai ekanta bhaktanam, for my ekanta bhaktas, na guna dosha udbhava gunaha. Material piety and material sin. Okay, they don't work on that platform. ये पाप कर्म है, ये पुण्य कर्म है, करना चाहिए. ये पाप कर्म है, नहीं करना चाहिए. You know, this is a pious activity I should. This is not a pious activity I should not do. You know, he does not think along those lines. So sadhunam. So why piety and impiety are for those people whose goal of life is to somehow escape misery and somehow enjoy in this material world. When that is the goal of, so people with this kind of goal of somehow wanting to enjoy in this material world, they want piety. And when they don't want to suffer but still stay in this material world, they don't want impiety. So, but devotees want to please Krishna. For pleasing Krishna, you know, they don't consider about piety or impiety. You know, that not bother them, right? So, so devotees do not think in terms of material sin or material piety. Not that they perform sinful activities for that matter, but they see sinful activities as, oh, this will not please Krishna. Not that, अरे ये करूंगा तो मुझे पाप लग जाएगा, मैं नरक में जाऊंगा. You know, I will go and suffer in hell. You know, that is not the reason why we refrain from doing some activity. As devotees refrain from doing an activity because if it would be unfavorable for my progress on the path of devotion, means if it would displease Guru, if it would displease Krishna, if it would displease the Vaishnavas, for that purpose we don't want to engage in an activity. We want to refrain from doing an activity, but not for escaping suffering. So that's why Srila Raghunath Das Goswami in his Manas Siksha, he says, Na dharmam na dharmam shrutigana niruktam kila kuru. Taje Radha Krishna prachura paricharyam ihatanu. He says, Na dharmam kuru. He says, Na shrutigana niruktam dharmam kuru. My dear mind, don't think in terms of dharma and other, he says. Rather think in terms of what is pleasing to Krishna. Vraje Radha Krishna Prachura Paricharyami Hatanu. You know, think in terms of what would be very much pleasing to Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan. Yes, Material piety and sin which arise from the good and evil of this world cannot exist with my unalloyed devotees, who, being free from material hankering, maintain steady spiritual consciousness in all circumstances. Indeed, such devotees have achieved me, the Supreme Lord, who am beyond anything that can be conceived by material intelligence. So these are the various verses that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes to establish that, for those who are qualified for bhakti, there is no need for thinking in terms of dharma, adharma, like that. They should think in terms of what is anukul for bhakti and what is pratikul for bhakti. Anukulyasya salpo, pratikulyasya varjanam. That is the thought process of a devotee. He does not think in terms of, oh, this is dharma, I will accept, this is adharma, I will reject. Like, okay. So then, further quotes from the Hari Bhakti Vilas. He says, the Hari Bhakti Vilas it is stated, Evam ekantinam prayah kirtanam smaranam prabhoho kurvatam parama pritya krityam anna rochate vihiteshveva nityesho pravartante swayam hite ityadi ekantinam bhati mahat likitam hitat. He says, the devotees whose minds are fixed on chanting and remembering Krishna's glories endure love have no taste for activities prescribed for lower stages. Although they are not attached or bound to follow prescribed rules of the scriptures, they sometimes follow out of their own accord. So they are not obliged to follow the principles of the lower stages, which means the principles of karma or jnana, they are not expected to follow, but sometimes they may follow out of their own accord. So, so this is nicely explained in the 8th verse of Upadeshamrita. So he says, Tan nama rupa charitadi sukirtananu mrityor kramena rasana manasi niyojya Tishtan vraje tad anuragnanugami kalam nayed akilamityupadesha saram. So he says Upadesha saram. The essence of all advice is that akilam kalam nayed. One should utilize one's full time, that is 24 hours a day, in tan nama rupa charita adi sukirtana anusmrityoho, in chanting, remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, kramena rasana manasi, and thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Braja, Tishtan Vraje, and Tad Anuragi Jana Anugami, and serve Krishna under the guidance of the devotees. Okay, so that's what he says, that they, although they are not attached or bound to follow the prescribed rules of scriptures, they sometimes follow out of their own accord. And they are not inspired by the rules of the scriptures, but they are inspired by Tad Anuragi. Inspired by the devotees of Vrindavan, Anuragi Chan, those who have deep love for Krishna. And they become Anugami, they become the followers of those people. And in following those Vrajavasis, they may automatically follow certain rules and regulations. That is fine. So he says, these are the glories of the pure devotees. That is, their glories are not diminished by neglecting others' prescribed rules. So, it is just like if someone, if a person who is suffering from jaundice does not eat the medicine which is prescribed for a person suffering from malaria, he will not lose anything. He is not supposed to eat the medicine that is prescribed for a malaria patient. He is supposed to eat his own medicine. So similarly, a devotee is supposed to perform the rules of bhakti he is not expected to perform the rules of karma. So if he does not perform the rules of karma, he is not uh, uh, he's not to be blamed for it. That's what is indicated here. The purport is that exalted devotees follow whatever rules of the lower stages they like. If it is suitable for bhakti, they will follow, right? So the jnanis follow the varnashrama of the karmis by their own will and not by rule or obligation. Okay. If one is qualified for jnana, they may still follow some varnashram dharma. See, the problem is when one feels obligated, it is wrong. But without obligation, if one out of their own accord follows, that is no problem. If a devotee thinks, "Arey, mujhe varnashram karna hi chahiye. I have to teach these varnashram duties. Otherwise, I cannot progress on the path of devotional service." If one thinks like that, then that is improper. He feels obligated. But otherwise, if he thinks, "ठीक है, this may be a varnashram duty, but still, I see that there is some scope for this to this can be favorable for devotional service, this particular thing. Because it is favorable for devotional service, I will accept it." So then that is not a problem. So he is not obligated by the Dharma Shastra to follow it. He is just accepting it because he finds that particular activity to be favorable for his good service. That's why. That's not a problem. Similarly, he says, similarly, the devotees out of their sweet will also follow the rules of the karmis and jnanis for some purpose. This means that although they are obliged to follow the prescriptions and prohibitions, they do so on their own accord sometimes. The topmost pure devotees are also not considered over attached to regulations when they follow the rules of karma, jnana, and odd sadhana bhakti. So sometimes the topmost devotees may also sometimes follow the rules of sadhana bhakti, or sometimes they may follow the rules of karma, jnana, etc. So they should not be considered to be engaged in niyama graha because they are not performing them in a mood of considering it to be a non-negotiable rule or a niyama. They are just performing it out of their own accord, like that. Okay. So then he continues, independently, they are engaged in the unalloyed devotional service of Lord Krishna. The practicing devotee who gives up niyamagraha but spontaneously follows the rules achieves auspicious results. The conclusion is that the practitioner attains a higher level as a result of following the rules prescribed according to his qualification. So if one follows the rules according to one's qualification, one attains a higher level. That is not whatever you are qualified for, one should practice. He should not go less, he should not go more. He should not maintain attachment for the rules of his previous level. Keeping this instruction always in mind, he should always engage in chanting and remembering Lord Krishna and thus continue advancing to higher levels. This is the principle of Niyamagraha. Okay, any quick discussion points, comments? This brings us to the end of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's discussion of Niyamagraha in Bhakti Aloka. We will subsequently discuss Srila Prabhupada's comment on Nectar of Instruction about Niyamagraha, and we will also discuss some points from the commentary of Srila Bhakti Rakshak Siddhar Swami Maharaj about Niyamagraha. But before that, if there are any quick question points, comments, you can please either raise your hands or type it in the chat box. I already have one question in the chat box. I will take it. But is involved in research. They may be involved in experimenting on small animals and using cattle product in research. As in this condition also, he should not consider dharma, adharma or sin, or should he engage in devotional service without considering these aspects of daily job? Well, um, uh, killing an animal is adharmic, and at the same time, it is not favorable for devotional service also. So, if one is engaged in those experiments, sometimes we have to see that it may be needed for furthering, you can say, a better life for human beings sometimes. Like anyone who is a doctor have definitely performed some, dissection, or I don't know, whatever they do with the rest and all that. That may become at one stage like inevitable. But if there is a means of avoiding it, one should definitely do it. So, killing an animal is not just an adharmic activity. It's not favorable for devotional service also. So with that consideration, one can definitely, if there is a scope of giving it up, one should definitely try to give it up like that. Anything else? Okay, if there is none, then we will move ahead to Srila Prabhupada's comment on Nigraha. Srila Prabhupada, okay. There is another. Okay. There is a question in the chat box. Sometimes Grihastha devotees like to immaturely imitate Haridas Thakur or some. Well, that sounds little, you can say, judgmental. I mean, how do we know for sure they are trying to imitate and they are immature? Maybe, or they may not to imitate. They may have a desire to more rounds. So just because someone is chanting more rounds does not necessarily mean that they have a desire to imitate and they are immature. So that sounds little judgmental to me. Or someone who is chanting more number of rounds. Okay, they are trying to imitate Haridas Thakur or someone who is chanting more number of rounds. It may not be imitation. Maybe they may feel inspired by them and they may try it out. It is just because they are feeling inspiration from someone and trying it out does not necessarily mean that they are imitating. So what should be the guideline? Chant more in number or attentive chanting of 16? Well, if someone can attentively chant 16 and more, it is not necessary that everyone who is chanting 16 is chanting attentively, and the moment you chant the 17th round, you are compromising on your quality. That is not necessary. And it's not necessary that if you increase the number, definitely quality will get compromised. So these are not like compulsory things. If someone says, देखो भाई, मैं दो ही चीज एक ही चीज सकता हूँ, either I will chant 16 rounds attentively or I will chant 20 rounds inattentively. I don't think anyone is claiming like that. So therefore, if someone chants 16 inattentive rounds, then even if he increases his rounds, it will be 20 inattentive rounds. So if someone is inattentive to, then whether he's chanting 4 rounds, 8 rounds, or 16 rounds, one has to work on that attentiveness. So, and if so the point is not that whether it is generally not a choice between quality and quantity. It is, I mean, we make it out like that. 16 माला कर रहा है, 16 अच्छा राउंड करो, 20 माला inattentive round मत करो. As if whoever is chanting 20 rounds is chanting inattentively, and whoever is chanting 16 rounds is chanting very attentive. It's not generally like that. So, so therefore, if someone is in such a situation that देखो, I can give only 2 hours for my chanting. If I attentively chant, I can chant only 16 rounds in that 2 hours. But if I inattentively chant, I can chant 20-22 rounds in that 2 hours. If someone presents such a hypothetical case, then you can say that no, chant 16 attentive rounds. But generally, this is not the case. Generally, this is not the case. Oh, now Grihasthas has to take other responsibilities also. So if they are neglecting other responsibilities and taking more uh, devotional responsibility or directly devotional responsibilities, if that is the cat needs, you need this. I cannot answer black and white because this needs uh, live guidance of a mature devotee, mature senior devotee. They have to analyze the mentality of that devotee. They have to know that devotee nicely. They have to see the situation of that devotee, what are whether those responsibilities he or she is neglecting are very essential or not so essential, and what is the mentality of the devotee and all that. So this needs this question cannot be answered in this forum. The general guidelines can be discussed in this forum, but the specific things, unless you know that devotee personally, and exactly understand that his or her situation, it is very difficult to comment on that. So yeah, that's my understanding. Okay, so now Srila Prabhupada's discussion of Niyamagraha in Nectar of Devotion, instruction. Srila Prabhupada writes, accepting some of the scriptural rules and regulations for immediate benefit as the utilitarian's advocate is called Niyama Agraha. Means some scriptural rules and regulations for some immediate benefit, not understanding the higher benefit that can come from practicing it, or neglecting the shastric rules and regulations are meant for spiritual development is called as niyama agraha. So niyama agraha has two types, niyama agraha and niyama agraha. The word agraha means eagerness to accept and agraha means failure to accept. By the addition of either of these two words to the word niyama, word niyamagraha is formed. Thus, Niyamagraha has twofold meaning that is understood according to the particular combination of words. Those interested in Krishna consciousness should not be eager to accept rules and regulations for economic advancement, which means not for dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Yet, they should very faithfully have scriptural rules and regulations for the advancement in Krishna consciousness, which means you are not bound by Dharma Shastras, Jnana Shastras, or Yoga Shastras, or the rules of Dharma Shastra, Jnana Shastras, or Yoga Shastras, but you are very much bound by the rules of the Bhakti Shastras. So he says they should strictly follow the regulative principles to avoid sex, meat eating, gambling, and intoxication. That's all. So this is Srila Prabhupada's commentary to this verse, to Niyamagraha. Then there is commentary by Srila Bhakti Rakshak Siddhar Swami Maharaj on Niyamagraha. Okay, so just hold on for, let me check how are we doing with time and number of slides. Okay, I think Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's Anuvritti commentary also is there. That is a little long. Anyway, we will do both. Okay. Srila Bhakti Swami Maharaj's commentary on Niyamagraha. So he says, Niyamagraha means to give abnormal attention to any particular ruling. Rulings are always meant for some particular stage. And after passing that stage, that ruling is no longer applicable and another ruling we have to mark. Same thing that we had discussed before. Once you cross one stage, then the rules of that stage are over and the rules of the next stage start. Just as on Ekadashi, we may be very firm to such a ruling that we must fast wholesale without taking even a drop of water. But the general rule is that I must keep my body fit for the service of the Lord so that I may take some water. So I must not be overly fit to a particular rule so that the general law will be hampered. So the general rule is Smartavya Sadatam Vishnur Vismartavyo na Jatuchit. And the secondary rule is one should fast on an Ekadashi, ideally even without water. So one should not be attached to the secondary rule so much that the primary rule is compromised. That I get diseased, I develop so much acidity and I'm struggling so much to, on Dwadashi and on Ekadashi, my health comes so disturbed that I'm not able to do my remember Krishna and do my general devotional activities properly. But I very much follow the rules of Ekadashi. So this is, you're compromising this, not that following Ekadashi fast is a inconsequential secondary rule, but it is certainly the purpose of fasting is so that one can focus on our spiritual practices more. But if by fasting we are unable to focus on our spiritual practices properly, then we can take some little anukalpa prasadam and then actually continue with our practice of devotion service. So that's what Maharaj is telling here. Then he again says, Niyamagraha has twofold meaning. Niyama agraha means too much ability to abide by the law. This is what we saw in the case of the Ekadashi following. Another meaning is Niyama agraha, when one does not accept any law at all and is not willing to abide by any law. That is Niyama agraha. Both these aspects are bad. We should follow the middle path, the E path, and not the extreme path. So the moderate path is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Yukta ahara viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. Yoga destroys the suffering of who is moderate in his eating and relaxation, performs all his activity in a regulated manner, and is well balanced in his sleeping and waking. So this is very important. So this is nisheda, prohibition. For example, one should not steal, but the Ananya Bhag devotee may steal a flower, take it away and offer to his devotee. But he is stealing. Then how should he be dealt with? Stealing is a crime. So how should he be dealt with? So the society has set the laws that we will accuse him that why have you stolen? And he may say that I have not stolen. It all belongs to Krishna and for the service of Krishna I am taking it. If that is a sincere vision, then it's not to be punished. This is the most important point. If he very sincerely feels like that, out of he really feels that it belongs to Krishna and he does not use any of it for his own personal sense gratification. He does not steal anything for his personal gratification. And he may sometimes steal something only for service of Krishna. If that is his sincere vision, then he should not be punished. But generally, this may not be the case. Many times in the name of everything belonging to Krishna, we may take it and use it for our own gratification. So that is not correct. So he says, if one is stealing for the purpose of Krishna, then that is not stealing, because his vision is so deep that he sees everything belongs to Krishna. If one really feels like that. But of course, we have to be very careful about social norms and all that. And because we are a part of global, organization, an institution, we have to see how this kind of an act, what effect it will have on the overall, on the credibility of the full institution. We have to see that. So that is very important actually. So, but in principle, if one is clearly able to see everything as belonging to Krishna, he has absolutely no mood of seeing anything as belonging to himself, then definitely if he takes something, steals something, then that is not considered to be stealing. But generally this case is very rare. It may be forbidden by the laws of society and even by the Shruti Shastra. But if he is really a sincere exclusivity of the Lord, none should interfere with his apparent misdeeds. Of course, he will be punished by the societal norms, no doubt about it. But according to the Bhakti Shastras, he is not fit to be punished. The Lord is seeing from the absolute standpoint, and the relative standpoint cannot come and clash with that. But of course, you cannot tell this to the non-devotees and say, look, he's a devotee, you cannot punish him. Krishna, this is yours is a relative standpoint, ours is an absolute standpoint. One cannot say like that. His movements are nirguna, transcendental. But on the saguna, mundane platform, there is gradual development from tamogun, jogun to sattvagun. If they encroach upon the rights of the nirguna, on those who are Krishna's direct servants, then their relative vision is wrong. He is on the absolute plane. Again, we have to see, we are part of an organization, and we have to see how sincere that devotee is. He may not be really that sincere. Then these rules do not apply to that. We have to be very careful. Okay. Whatever he is doing, if he considers Krishna to be the unchallenged master of everything, then he is right and they are wrong. That things belong to him, that thing belongs to him, this thing belongs to them, this woman belongs to that gentleman. This is simply a contract amongst you. But from the absolute sense, it does not have any position. Everything belongs to Krishna, and one who works backed by Krishna consciousness is right. We have to understand this. Anyway, any quick comments, discussion points? This is Shaktirakshak Siddha Swami Maharaj's comment about Niyamagraha. Okay, if there are no discussion points or comments, we will continue. Okay, next, Anuvritti commentary by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Generally, wherever Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Swami Maharaj already cover Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur commentary, I have not taken them, but here Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur has added some additional discussion, additional points here. So I have taken his commentary also, so we will read that. And that would bring us to the end of discussion on Niyamagraha. So here, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta writes, the dry scholarship of the Gyanis, which amounts to nothing more than useless scriptural argumentation, praise of the benefits of pious deeds, which generates fondness for religious rituals in the karmis, and the talks pleasing to the senses of those who are possessed of many desires are called prajalpa. Okay, this is all prajalpa. To accept the rules of the Jnana Shastras in order to obtain liberation is called agraha or overzealousness. So the niyamagraha starts from here. Okay. To accept the rules of the Jnana Shastras or to accept the rules of the Jnana Shastra in order to obtain liberation or the Karma Shastras to obtain material enjoyment is called as niyamagraha. Attachment for the rules outlined in the scriptures promoting pragmatism. So pragmatism means practical as opposed to idealistic results. With a desire for sensual enjoyment, both in this world and the next is known as niyamagraha. So basically, attachment to the rules of the Jnana Shastras or attachment to the rule of the Karma Shastras. When by a person who is qualified for Bhakti, both fall within the category of niyamagraha. So he says, establishment of certain rules of conduct appropriate for one's own status in order to achieve immediate happiness as advocated by the utilitarians or those who promote the greatest happiness for the greatest number is also known as niyamagraha. So this is Prabhupada also talks about this. Okay. So accepting certain rules for immediate happiness, immediate gratification. Even though by following those rules, one may get higher benefits also, like Krishna Prem, etc. And that is called as, that is also Niyamagraha. So to remain indifferent to the rules that are prescribed for the attainment of Bhakti is known as Niyama Agraha. This is the, I mean, most of it is repeated, we have already seen, but some things that he adds here and there. So Niyama Agraha means to be indifferent to the rules of Bhakti. That is Niyama Agraha. Such persons are so audacious that they try to pass off even their detestable wantonness and depravity as the most sacred and elevated path of spontaneous devotion. This is, he's about the Sahajiyas here. He's talking about the Sahajiyas. So what Sahajiyas do, they have such detestable habits, very, all kinds of bad habits. But in the name of following Raganuga Bhakti, they say that, oh, this is Raganuga, you all are Vaidhi Sadhakas, for you, you need to follow. We Raganugas, we need not follow all those rules. So in the name of following Raganuga, they just like they reject these rules, which is all incorrect. Niyama Agraha. In Haribhakti Vilas, the disposition of such persons has been explained in the following words. So Haribhakti Vilas describes, this is for Sahajiyas. What does Haribhakti Vilas? Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidim Vina Aikantiki Harer Bhaktir Utpada Eva Kalpate. Of course, this is quoted by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu also. So although engaged in single-minded devotion, God Hari, if one transgresses the regulations mentioned in the Shruti, Smriti, Puranas and the Narada Pancharatra, great misgivings are produced. Utpata eva kalpate. So that is the point here. So if one transgresses the regulations out of improper faith in the rules, so then that is definitely Utpata eva kalpate. Like that. In the Kalyana Kalpataru, also Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said. So now, starting from here, almost till the end of this commentary, I think. Just hold on, let me check. Okay. Yeah, I think almost till the end he is quoting Kalyana Kalpataru only. Where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is criticizing the Sahajiya mentality. So Sahajiya mentality is Niyama Agraha. Prematurely rejecting rules, thinking that one is so qualified. This is Sahajiya mentality. So the whole of the rest of the commentary of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur, he is quoting Kalyana Kalpataru by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He is quoting this flawed Sahajiya mentality of prematurely rejecting the rules. So he quotes, he says, "My dear mind, what have you done? Being in a very immature stage, you have cheated yourself unknowingly by perpetrating the fact of narrow-mindedness upon the pure Vaishnava Sampradaya." So he's telling you are not properly educated. You think that the Vaishnavas are narrow-minded by putting so many rules and regulations on your so-called flowing bhakti. But you are misguided because you are not qualified for that. Says you are supposed the suppose the pure conceptions and validity of the sampradaya to be hypocrisy and thus abandon them. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes in Kalyana Kalpataru, he says, the pure conceptions and validity of the sampradaya, you have considered them to be hypocrisy and thus you have abandoned them. You have given up wearing the Vaishnava tilak markings and neck beads and put aside your chanting beads. So, you have nicely worn neck beads and tilak markings, but you have kept your chanting beads aside because you think that, oh, I am following Raganuga. The gopis do not chant on chanting beads. So why should I chant on chanting beads like that? One gives up. So then he says, you think what is the use of wearing tilak? I can chant within my mind. So what need is there of beads? You're not following Vaidhi Bhakti. I am following Raganuga Bhakti. Means you are greater than Srila Rupa Goswami. You are greater than Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also, who all chanted with beads. Sankhya Purvaka Namagana Natibi Kala Ani Kritau. So Samkhya Purvaka Namagana Natibihi. Their chanting and their obeisances also they used to count. So have they become Vaidhi Sadhakas and you have become Raganuga Sadhaka? So then he says that once diet has nothing to do at all with bhajan, they say. So don't think that you have to give up eating meat, fish, or eggs. The mind is thinking like this is Sahajiya mentality. Kirata Hunandra Pulinda Pulkasha Abi Rashumbaya Prasadaya. Yenye Chapapa Yadapashraya Shreya Shuddyanti Tasmai Prabha Vishnave Namaha. So anyone can practice bhakti. So for them, bhakti means Raganuga bhakti. So it doesn't really matter if I eat. Bhakti is bhakti dependent on purity? No. So therefore, how does it matter if I eat meat or eggs or intoxication? That is their argument. Don't think that you must stop drinking wine or tea and take intoxicants such as pan, tobacco, marijuana, hemp, or opium. You have cast aside the need for taking initiation. You think, Diksha ka kya jarurat hai? It is just action between me and Krishna. Why should someone else come in between my relationship between Krishna and myself? So like that. You have begun to refer yourself as incarnation. You have begun to propagate your new theories very powerfully through different agents. So during Bhaktivinoda Thakur's time, there were many even now if you go to Puri or Vrindavan, you will see many such people, chanting all kinds of mantras, Nittai Gaur Radhe Sham, Vaja Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, like that. This is one Apasampradaya. There are many such Apasampradayas like that. You are criticizing the opinions of the previous great personalities and acharyas of the path of bhakti, considering to be mistaken. Some cunning persons put on tilak and tulsi mala and cheat others. Therefore, you avoid the association of anyone who wears tilak and mala, considering them to be all cheaters. So he's telling what are the different kinds of mentality which can be flawed. Just because someone cheated you wearing tilak and kantimala does not mean everyone who is wearing tilak and kantimala is a cheater. But my dear brother mind, please consider what you have gained by this. You have given up gold for ashes. Your present life and the next have both been utterly ruined. You address everyone as a hypocrite, knave, and cheater. So this is another extreme where you can any person wearing tilak and kantimala to be a cheater. So this also is wrong. That's what he says. But you have failed to attain Bhagavad Bhakti. What will be your fate at the time of death? O mind, what should I tell you? You utter the words prema, prema, but what good will it avail? Prema is a rare and priceless jewel. You will have to undertake arduous sadhana to attain it. It's not easy to attain Krishna Prem. You have to practice arduous sadhana to attain Krishna Prem. By deceitful practice, you make a show of tears, trembling, horripilation, and fainting at the time of kirtan or hearing spiritual discourses. Yet your real business is simply to accumulate wealth, women, and prestige. So this is what the Sahajas were actually involved in. They were involved in all these kinds of bogus activities. When you have not even a trace of attachment for pure sadhana bhakti, which is essential for the acquisition of prema, then how will you obtain such pure Bhagavat prema? When you don't have, without attachment to sadhana bhakti, how will you attain Bhagavat prema? Because Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu says that one can get, there are two ways of getting bhava. One is sadhana abhinivesha bhava. When one has attachment to performing sadhana, by that attached to sadhana bhakti, one can attain bhava, or one can attain bhava by kripa siddhi. But this kripa siddhi is extremely rare. So therefore, one cannot be dependent on that. So therefore, he says that when you have not even a trace of attachment for pure sadhana bhakti, which is essential for the acquisition of prema, how will you obtain Bhagavat prema? So just by chanting prema, prema, the sadhana is inferior, prema is superior. Just because sadhana is inferior and prema is superior does not mean you have prema bhakti. You will have to first give up 10 offenses against the holy name and chant Harinam continuously. This is the first step. Consciously try to give up the 10 offenses against the holy name and chant Harinam continuously. You should then hear Harikatha in the association of pure Vaishnavas. Satam prasangad mama virya samvido bhavanti hritkarna rasayana kata. So one has to hear Harikatha in the association of pure Vaishnavas. Then, by the mercy of Shri Nam Prabhu, unalloyed prem will arise automatically in your heart. You have not performed bhajan in a regulated manner. You have not performed sankirtan in the association of pure devotees. You have not withdrawn your mind from sense objects and engaged it in remembering God in a secluded place. Without having done any of these things, how can you actually get Krishna Prem? Right? That is the point that is that he is making here. Without first climbing the tree, you attempt to pluck the fruit with your own hand has simply gone in vain. So climbing the tree, attempt to climb the tree is actually performing sadhana bhakti. Plucking the fruit is prema bhakti. You don't want to climb the tree, but you want the fruit. How is it possible? That's what he's telling. So he says the most sacred and pure Krishna Prem is extremely rare. By misleading others, you will simply cheat yourself. Don't do it. First, make yourself by performing sadhana. So why he is making all this? Because this is the niyamagraha which is performed by the sahajiyas. This is the niyamagraha of the sahajiyas. Then prema will become easily accessible to you. Oh brother, although lust and love, kama and prema appear identical by external indications, they are not at all the same. Kama is like rusted iron, whereas prema is like pure gold. You have seized kama, imagining it to be gold. Can anyone obtain prema by such absurd means? Okay, another 5 lines. So this is all Kalyana Kalpataru. Bhakti Vinod Thakur, in one of his bhajan, he describes. So he says, "O foolish mind, you have become intoxicated by uselessly considering kama to be prema. The lust for bones and flesh appears alluring for the time being. That lust chases endlessly after the objects of the senses." So these sahajiyas, some of them were really absurd. They were engaged in all kinds of illicit activities in the name of prema. Actually, some of them would dress like gopis and engage in all these kinds of immoral activities, really thinking that to be progress on the path of Krishna Bhakti. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is addressing all of that. But unalloyed love is the natural disposition of the jiva. That prema is fully sentient and swelled by nature. The object of that prema is Sri Hari alone, not a doll of bones and flesh. So some people dress like Krishna and some people dress like gopis, and they engage in such immoral activities. He says the real object prema is not a dressed up doll of bones and flesh. Just because someone has dressed like Krishna and you have dressed like a gopi does not mean what doing is prema. That is kama, he says. Because the real object of prema is Sri Hari alone. At present, prema is in a dormant condition being covered by kama. Therefore, you must endeavor to dispel this lust and to initiate the awakening of love. He said, unless you dispel lust by practice of sadhana bhakti, you cannot initiate the awakening of prema. So he says, for a good fortune due to the devotional pious credits, agyata sukriti, accumulated over many previous lifetimes, pure faith arises. Okay, so this is the first stage. Agyata sukriti, accumulate over many lifetimes. Okay, this is the first stage. By that, one gets Shraddha. Okay, then by hearing Harikatha and performing Haram Kirtan in the association of pure devotees. So this is Shraddha. Then there is Sadhu Sangha plus Nakriya. Bhajana Kriya in Sadhu Sangha. Okay. So this is third and fourth. Then in that association, Shraddha is mature and evolves successively into steadfastness, Nishtha, Ruchi, and Asakti. So this is then Sadhu Sangha Bhajana Kriya leads to Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti. From Asakti, Bhava makes its appearance, and from Bhava, Prema is manifested. This is the order of development by which Prema is awakened. So you're not doing Bhajana Kriya, you're not even accepting the association of pure Vaishnavas. Means you really don't even have the proper Shraddha. Okay, because the real symptom of Shraddha is a desire for Bhajana Kriya and Sadhu Sangha. But if you don't have that desire for Bhajana Kriya and Sadhu Sangha, then you don't have real faith only. Faith is bogus faith. And then subsequently you have to engage in Bhajana Kriya, Bhajana Kriya and Sadhu Sangha, which will lead to Anartha Nivritti. Then it will lead to Nishtha, then Ruchi, then Asakti, then Bhava, then Prema comes. So Prema may be obtained only by taking support of this progressive evolution and never by any other means. Okay. So therefore, O wicked mind, why do you fear to take up this step-by-step method of sadhana? So if we reject it, then we may get the satisfaction of thinking that it is prema, but in reality, we'll just keep suffering in this material world. So he is talking about niyama agraha, rejecting the actual rules of sadhana, thinking oneself overqualified. This is the mode of the Sahajiyas. By mere imitation of prema, you will not obtain anything. By such an imitative display, you will attain one temporary happiness of sense enjoyment, which will also result in misery in the end. With this understanding, you should give up all offenses and impediments and engage yourself in pure sadhana bhakti. In this lies your good fortune. Okay. So this is what he says by quoting this bhajan from Kalyana Kalpataru, where Vinod Thakur severely condemns this mood of the Sahajiyas who think that they can have become very advanced and progressed just by imitating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or by dressing themselves as Radha and Krishna and neglecting all the rules of sadhana bhakti and not following the gradual process. Such people reject even the teachings of Srila Rupa Goswami and the other acharyas. Okay, that brings us to the end of this discussion of Niyamagraha. But before we wind up, any quick discussion points, comments, questions, anything anyone would like to ask? Anything? Okay, Ramacharu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, so this is a very important topic that we are talking about, the Sahaja mentality. And I have been trying to a little bit meditate on this. Now, what we just read is kind of, far extreme of both sides. But if we try to see in the middle, such as we are basically trying to practice sadhana bhakti, and then sometimes, not showing up in Sunday feast, or ignoring the importance of, devotee association, or not getting up in Mangala Aarti, or in one of your lecture you mentioned how we should give the classes, and rights and responsibility. So, what I would like to understand from you, that if you try to bring in the middle and give some advice to devotees like, ourselves, where we see this Sahaja mentality coming up in our day-to-day activity.
So for this, actually, this can come up in anything, as you rightly said, attending morning programs or any of these things. One can have a genuine reason, maybe some health reason, family commitments, things like that. Or sometimes they may think that, oh, I am no longer bound by these rules. One may think like that. So that's why for these things, it is some mature guidance, because because we cannot judge others. We have to try to properly understand them. They may have some genuine reasons, but this mentality can very much creep in. They may think that, oh, I have spent so much time, I am no longer, I cannot be affected by Maya, or Maya cannot touch me. I don't have to be so careful. Or morning program is no longer so important for me. Or many different ways this Sahaja mentality can creep in. But I mean, it can practically creep in anything. For example, even study of Shastras. One may think that, yeah, I mean, uh, we are not here to become Gyanis. Many times people say, we are not here to become Gyanis, we are here to become followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We should just chant. Yeah, but as if reading Srimad Bhagavatam is an act of Gyan, not a devotee. So, well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself actually studied Bhagavatam so many times. So, that there are so many, or sometimes you may think that, I don't really need a guru, we may think. It is all between me and Krishna. Even though one may be following, one may not dress up like a gopi and things like that. One may still attend morning program, one may still chant the holy names, 16 rounds and all that. But if one thinks I don't need to, it's just between me and Krishna. That is also Sahaja mentality. That way, in many ways, Sahaja mentality can creep in. Not, we can keep on thinking about many such ways. But these are few things that comes to my mind. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Prabhu, you always mention about live guru, and
Live
that now
guidance, I said.
live guidance, yeah, live
Yeah.
guidance. Yes, Prabhu, sorry, misword. Live guidance. So you know that recently we are trying to basically remotely associate with devotee whom we can learn the most, but it's not really. I mean, I don't know how exactly you mean by having a live guidance, because not everybody devotees are uniformly spread, where you can go somewhere, you might end up having just yourself with like 4 or 5 people, and in a small town somewhere. Then there it's very hard to have somebody as your life guide.
I mean,
So we have to take.
live guidance does not necessarily mean the person has to be physically with you, but it can even be the person may be situated in a different place also. But if you endeavor to establish a good relationship with that person, and to the extent that you feel comfortable opening up your heart and sharing your struggles and your challenges, and if that person is mature enough to understand it, empathize with your situation, and clearly understand your situation and guide you, that person need not necessarily stay with you geographically, uh, but uh, uh, but still that is considered to be live.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Anything else before we wind up for the day? Okay. So if there is none, we have a few minutes time left. I will not start the next discussion on Janasangha. We will pause here and continue this discussion next Wednesday. So Thank you very much for your patient listening and your enthusiastic participation. We will continue this discussion next week. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Shri Bhakti Aloka ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay.